Hello again, this is section 2 of our manager training series, and this one focuses on those pesky little pieces of paper, the invoices, and this one specifically for full service clients. So just quickly at a high level, let me explain why invoices are so important. As we discussed in the introduction section, the idea of bar I as a business is better performance for bars through better information, and really the essence of that is being able to precisely compare for every product at the bar how many servings of product were wrung versus how many were poured. So the invoices relate to the usage part, that how many were poured. Let's imagine we're inventorying just a single product, Jack Daniels, and let's say at the start of the week we had 10 bottles, and then at the end of the week we found that we had 8. And obviously it doesn't take a genius to figure out that we've used 2 bottles of Jack Daniels. Well, as a slight complication, what about if during that week we had 4 bottles of Jack Daniels delivered? We still perhaps started with 10 and found 8, but now to calculate the usage we need to take the difference, which is 2, plus that 4 bottles that were delivered, and obviously therefore we've used 6 bottles. So if we're going to precisely account for what was poured, we need to know what the deliveries are, and this honestly can be problematic with some bars. We often say if we had $1 for every missing invoice we would be rich, and that's pretty much true. So it should be simple. We're simply asking that invoices be checked in and put in a single place. We're going to get into a little bit more detail, but please give us your best attention, help us establish a system, and hopefully it mean that we will talk about invoices once at the start, we'll establish a system, and then we won't be chasing after these invoices again. The flip side of that is if we can't get this invoices section working, we're going to spend the first few months of working together chasing after pieces of paper rather than focusing on and improving your results. So the most important number 1 rule is that all invoices must be available in a single place according to a system. So what do we mean by that? So all available means obviously we're not missing any, and that's why having some sort of system is important here. And what I mean by a single place obviously is we have a folder. I don't care where the place is, it could be a folder in the office. Probably best it's somewhere accessible to all staff members, including delivery drivers. So a folder on the walk-in cooler door works. Either way, you have an established system, everybody knows the system, and it's communicated to people. I mentioned delivery drivers, but delivery drivers are an important part of this. You'll probably have more than 5 delivery drivers for your different distributors, and so with all these different working parts, it's important you get them on board, explain what the system is, and explain where you expect them to leave their invoices when they leave their deliveries. Now, another thing with the delivery drivers, ideally we would have our deliveries delivered at a time when the beverage manager is available to check them in. That's not always possible. So the next best alternative is to ensure that the delivery drivers are leaving newly delivered products separate from existing inventory. They're not mixing it together. You're not allowing them to pull kegs that supposedly are empty. You really shouldn't let them into your storage areas. We should have them leave the product outside, and that will ensure there's no question, and we can do our checks to make sure that what the invoice says was delivered was actually delivered. So part of this process and system of making sure that all invoices are available is establishing a check-in procedure. And what we want for a check-in procedure is that we check these things line by line. So when Southern comes and delivers a number of products and there's Patron on there, we don't want to just confirm, hey, yeah, there's Patron in that box. If it says 4 bottles, we need to check physically that there are 4 bottles there, and then put a little check mark on the left-hand side next to the Patron where it says 4 bottles and move on to the next item. And then when you've completed each item in the list, we would like you to sign your name at the bottom and say, checked by. Again, communication, a bit of attention to detail will really help us and help this system be effective. So another thing is that when we uncover any errors, or if there's things that we need to communicate that are going to mess with our numbers, the easiest and best way to communicate this information is by writing on the invoices. The reason that's the best method is that when you notice these errors or problems, you will have the invoice hopefully in your hand, and so if you just take a pen and mark it at the time, it means everybody shares in the responsibility of noting these points, and also because we write it at the time, we won't forget and have to try and remember the adjustments from the past week or two. So the first one is obvious, errors. If there is an error, if you didn't receive something you were charged for, mark it there, communicate that to your distributor, pass that information to your bookkeeper so that you don't pay for that product that wasn't received. Another one is if you receive product, what I'm talking about here is return. So if you receive product that was not ordered, we personally think that you should send that product back. Here in Colorado, we have free product. It's not allowed in a lot of states. But what happens is there's a new weird flavor of vodka which is attached to an order, and it comes free for a few weeks. And then suddenly they decide, well, they like having this product free, so now we're going to give it to them at full price. So suddenly that weird flavored vodka arrives and it costs $30. You didn't order it, and unless you send it back, you're quickly going to get into a mode where the distributor is determining what's held at your bar, not you. Obviously, there is give and take required in a relationship with your distributor. There'll be times you might do them a favor and purchase this or that, but overall, it needs to work for you. You probably spend thousands of dollars with them, and so it's important that you let them know you're not a soft touch. So when they start sending you things you don't want, send them back. You'll set the relationship and make sure you're not overcharged. And then the third common example is removals. If you order something which is going to be removed from inventory, either it's perhaps used in the kitchen or it's being removed, but for whatever reason we're not including it in accountability calculations, we'd like you please to mark that again on the invoice. So if it's going to the kitchen, you can scrub it out and write to kitchen. Another common example would be if your owner orders a special case of red wine or whatever, then if you just scrub it out and put ordered by owner, do not count, it saves us time because we don't have to enter the invoice for that product, potentially open a new master list item for that product, and then we're not chasing after you asking you, hey, where do those 12 nice bottles of red wine that you ordered go? So in the case of some bars that have a bookkeeper, often it's the case that the physical paper invoices actually leave the building. Perhaps they're sent remotely somewhere else to your bookkeeper to pay them. If that's the case at your bar, it's important that we still have those copies. So before you remove the physical paper invoice, we ask you please to copy it, to make a PDF or JPEG image of it. And a good idea is to mark each time you have scanned an invoice. If you write bar I on the top and circle it, then it will ensure that you don't get confused about which invoices have been scanned, which haven't. And again, very simple system. After you scan it, mark it. It just keeps everyone straight. And again, we're aiming here to reduce the amount of questions and problems we have where we're not clear about what was delivered, when it was delivered, what was sent back. A little attention to detail, please, will make this system a lot simpler. And then a final note for our large volume clients. There are some clients whose the volume or the size of their establishment is such that it probably takes more than 2 hours, even our faster counting speeds, to count all their inventory. If it's going to take us more than 3 hours to count your inventory, likely we're going to ask you to scan your invoices to Dropbox the day before. And the advantage of that is it means that we can do all of that exciting data entry before we turn up early in the morning. And what that means in turn is that when we finish counting, we're virtually completing the process, and we would aim to complete the process early, like at 11 in the morning would be ideal, right when you come in or even earlier, so that we can check those items when you're engaged, when we have your time and attention before the lunch rush comes. We'd like to complete the process as early as possible so that we have your time and attention before it gets crazy at the bar. So we will ask some of you guys to put those invoices into Dropbox even if you're a full service client. So that's it for invoices. Number one rule is have all your invoices available in one place. Get the delivery drivers on board, tell them what the system is, require that they toe the line on that. Check in your deliveries line by line. Ideally your beverage manager will do that, but either way, have the deliveries put somewhere separate. Do please, the best method for telling us about any changes, errors, returns, removals is to write them directly on the invoice. Please write legibly, and we really appreciate your efforts in doing that. If you remove the invoices, you'll need to make copies of them. And finally, if you're a big client, we may ask that you scan your invoices to Dropbox. But that's it for invoices for full service clients. As always, thank you very much for your time and attention.